we will jump right into it. You and I were talking a little bit about this before I hit record here, but before we jump into the rest of the questions, Megan, you spend a lot of time in your work talking about empathy in marketing, and empathy is like really a key term right now. It's very hot in terms of what people are discussing in ways to use empathy to attract the right customers and also to encourage them to make the sale and convert. So can you expand a little bit on what empathy means in marketing to you and in your work?
As an introvert, I spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to be an effective communicator. And I feel like in communication, similar to in user research, we really need to have empathy for that person that we're talking to. And so just like you wouldn't want to hijack a conversation and just talk about yourself and your products and everything, we don't want to do that on our websites or in our marketing either. We really want to blend that understanding of what our user is there for with our goals as a business owner.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. And we talk about that a little bit in the workshops as well, but I think there's such a broader sense of kind of understanding what your client needs at that, or customer needs in that exact moment at every stage in the process. Like not just reading your copy, but also signing up for your mailing list and like venturing to the page on your site and all that stuff. So I think it's really fascinating to hear that all of that comes directly from a place of empathy. So can you give me maybe an example of something that you have been working on recently, either for yourself or a client, there's no need to name names, in using this undercover research technique? Because it sounds like it's just, in terms of client research, I think I tell so many people that you should just always be on the alert. You don't need to set aside a specific pocket of time for like client research. It's always going on around you. So can you share kind of an example of how some of that undercover research might work?
I think it's great to always be aware too, but I find that I kind of am not. And so I'll just block out, like before I want to create a sales page, like an hour to go through and research. So recently I was doing a project for productivity coaching. And so the sales page, I needed to identify, what people are talking about in terms of productivity. How are they describing what they would like to feel? And how are they describing what their current state is? And then I could translate those phrases that I found from my research directly into the copy on the sales page.
That's the best marketing and sales strategy, content creation strategy you can come up with. It's so much better to use your clients and customers' ideas directly, address their needs directly, than assuming you know what they might want. And I think that's kind of a common misstep that a lot of people take when creating their copy or design, where they are creating kind of sales content and a strategy based on what they think their client needs to know or wants, as opposed to knowing, but listening to the client first and being told. So I think that's such an important component, to start with research before everything. What are things that you tend to look for and listen in for in customer research that really informs not just copy, but also design and UX? What are some kind of ways that you tend to reinterpret that research for those pieces of the puzzle, so to speak?
In terms of design, I don't know that the research is as important to me, because I actually design based on like the personal brand. So that's more about the business owner rather than who they're working with.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. And does it inform UX at all, or is that just something that kind of comes after the design phase?
So UX is actually pretty formulaic. There are like established patterns that savvy internet users expect. Like when you go to a page, you expect if I click on the logo, that'll go to the home. So It's basically a set of principles that you would always use, rather than being something that would adjust on a site-by-site basis.
But I think another thing I want to talk to you about, because you and I are both in serious agreement on this, I believe we talked about it during your time in the workshops, that all great design starts with great copy. But why do you feel so many entrepreneurs and even designers sometimes kind of jump the gun and start with design first?
I think it is because we are more creative. So oftentimes like the beginnings of projects and the ideas, like they light us up. We get super psyched about it. But then you start listing out all the to-dos, all the steps that it takes to get there. And we get overwhelmed and lose focus and lose steam. So I think it's easier sometimes to start with that big end product being the website. And just start jumping in and designing and building it without doing all the stuff that leads up to it.
I think there's something to be said for that feeling of like, it's design is almost the most instant gratification kind of feel of any creative profession, I think, because that's how it all comes together. But it should be the last step when so many people start with it as the first step, maybe just to feel like they've done something. Speaking of steps, sort of, what are the steps that you recommend your clients go through before hiring a website strategist like you, before hiring a designer or UX designer in general?
Well, I think it's really good to get to know yourself and the kind of brand and business that you want to build, because we don't want to look like everyone else online. So if you don't understand what makes you different, it's hard to express that visually on the website. Also, you'd want to be clear about the kind of services or products that you're going to offer and who you'd like to work with. So once you have, I think, those foundational pieces of understanding your brand and your client, then you're pretty good to go into the next phase.
Awesome. And that's so simple too, just being clear about what makes you different and what you want to offer people and how you want to work with them. I think that's phenomenal. And another follow-up that I had, and this is, I think, differentiating yourself in the market, right? Branding is the way that you differentiate yourself from everybody else doing exactly what it is you do. And we talk about voice a lot as a key marketing differentiator in the workshops, but in terms of, we talk about client experience and customer experience, but is there a kind of approach you recommend outside of that to help people identify kind of what makes them different, what makes them unique in the space?
Well, I really liked in the workshops how in your voice lesson, you talked about looking at the kind of music that you listen to. I had never heard anyone teach that before. And music can be such a powerful connector and emotional thing for us. So if we can look to those kind of things for ideas.
Thank you very much. I think it's so important as creatives to look at what inspires us because, we're a little sponges and just receiving so many things at all times to kind of offer to the rest of the world. And I think I love that was a huge kind of aha moment for you, because it's something that I think as professional creatives, we've got to take ourselves so much more seriously in terms of kind of likes and dislikes, and as brands and business owners, the way we see the world and the way we want to be seen is a differentiator. It's not just some aspirational idea. We have to be clear kind of about what makes us different. So was there anything about your journey through the workshops in terms of your music? Was there something specific, like a song or something that's kind of tapped into one of your differentiators as well?
I don't think so. I mean, I tried. I listened to a bunch of my favorite songs and I tried to find some phrases that I might use strategically on my site. But I think it just was more about the genre. Like I like alternative grunge kind of 90s because that's when I grew up.
Absolutely.
So just translating that kind of on my site.
I love that. Yeah. And there's definitely that, like, especially with the fonts that you use, it's a really, I definitely get that vibe. That's so interesting to hear. When writing, when I write copy and then I hand it off to the designer and that's their job. You do both and you kind of you are the thread of the whole experience. So can you talk to me a little bit about how once copy is written, kind of what happens from there designing the page? Do you tend to wireframe it and build out from there? What's your process for using copy to design the page? Something that maybe our listeners can use if they are choosing to go template free for designing their site or hiring a designer.
So it's structured in sections. So we'll have like the introductory headline section, and then we'll have like the before picture, and then the after picture you want to take them through, and then like your offer as the bridge. So because it's in sections that way, then it makes it very easy to also design in those sections. And so I call it a modular layout because you're thinking in terms of rows of content. And then you can easily like add or remove from that because it's not like one long page. It's like a row at a time.
Also in terms of you mentioning like the current state, present, and the future, and then the offer being the gap between the two. I think that's so smart. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the call, but I'd love to hear a bit about user experience. What I love about your site is that it's so crisp and clear, and the reader and consumer always knows where to go next. So we talked about kind of things to keep in mind, but how do you map that out before design? Is there a specific process that you use time and time again? I know you mentioned there are, it's sort of not cut and paste, so to speak, but there are basic frameworks that are kind of universal. So can you talk to me a little bit about what that looks like in terms of mapping out UX?
Sure. Well, when it comes to a website, usually the home page is the most visited page, and then the about page is actually usually the second highest page. So when you're thinking about designing it, in the navigation, you kind of want to lay out each link in the order that people would go through your site. So you'd have the about page and then maybe blog or contacts, like depending on what you have up there. And then also, I think when it comes to having a really nice, clean site, people oftentimes don't have enough white space. So they don't give enough breathing room to their content. and it becomes smushed, or maybe they'll have like text spanning the whole width of the frame. So I really like to give a lot of breathing room to the content, and I think that helps.
Awesome. That's so important. I mean, I feel sometimes when there's white space in my website that people aren't going to scroll, or I start to freak out because I feel like there's a big gap and people are going to think the page is ended. How do you kind of strike that balance?
Unless the people that you're talking to are maybe 50 years old and older. I think most people that are in our markets these days are savvy, and they know that they can keep scrolling until they get to the end.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. I think I have to trust my consumers more, because I was working on a landing page for the Black Friday sale I just ran to, and the designer, there were just like big gaps between boxes and headers, and I was like, oh, this feels weird. I need to make sure people know that the page continues, but you have to trust your designer in that case. And also a question for you in terms of UX. I find a lot of clients I run into have challenges because they have a lot of products and offers. Some of them are static products, some of them are one-to-one work, some of them are free stuff. Is there a way that you recommend kind of ordering those or presenting them that feels intuitive to, I guess, I'm sure it's on a case-by-case basis, of course, but is there a way that you recommend users kind of entrepreneurs display that kind of information in those offers that makes sense to the reader?
On your homepage, you could have like 3 boxes that people could kind of jump off into your content based on like self-segmenting. Like if they're going to be more likely to go to this one product, that could be one option on your homepage. But then I would also separate the products and the services. So maybe you have a shop page in your navigation, and then maybe a services page in the navigation. In terms of like ordering your services, I've heard that you should start with the highest priced one, but then someone else told me start with the lowest priced one because they might think you're too expensive. So I don't think there is a right or wrong to go there.
Yeah, actually, that's so interesting too, because I've had this debate often, especially with stuff like add-on offers where you have the basic offer and then you have like one-on-one coaching. I personally always have the initial offer at the top and then the coaching offer second, because then you can outline the initial offer and then detail the add-on. But I had a couple people tell me to do the reverse, and it just didn't feel like it made sense to my brain, and I didn't know if it would make sense to customer brains. Do you have a preferred, especially in terms of like add-on services and stuff, do you have a preferred method?
Yeah, I think if you were talking about a service that had add-ons or like different tiers, then you would just start talking about the base service and what that includes, because that makes most sense for the flow down the page. And then you could add on additional elements at additional price points. Also,
when it comes to positioning, pricing, and products, I think it may just depend on the audience, to be totally honest. I think just depending on how ready people are to buy, how fat their wallets are at that present time, or a huge range of factors. So would you recommend people just kind of go with their gut on that for the most part?
I feel like people aren't going to go to your site initially and then jump into the buying. I think that we need to warm them up by providing a lot of value first. Mm-hmm. So I would say just try to get them on your email list and maybe into a specific segment based on what their interest might be. And then just give them enough value so that when it comes the time to make the sale, it feels like a logical next step.
Absolutely. And I think this is something you do so well with your own funnels and promos and stuff that I've been watching. And you guys don't know this, but I open, I think, every single one of Megan's emails just because I love reading about them and seeing how she does things. And they're all so clear and tight. So go and grab her free stuff as much as you can on her site to not just learn from her, but also see the way she does things, because I think you do a really great job of providing so much value. You do video series, you do free offers, you do there's so much on deck there. How do you select what offers lead into another? Because I know you have certain freebies that work up into higher packages with you, some freebies that work into your programs and all of that stuff. So how do you kind of select that initial invitation offer?
Well, I like to use an offer initially that's on the lower price scale, because I know a lot of people that join my list are more beginners in business. And so I don't want to overwhelm them with something like a huge investment when maybe they're not at the point in their business where that would even be appropriate for them. So I start with a lower price tier, and then based on the opt-in, I try to match it up. So like when I was doing my video series, that was talking about how to create a website to attract more clients. And then the offer at the end of that was how you can easily book clients with a mini service.
Ooh, a mini service. What's a mini service?
A mini service is something that takes like less than 2 hours for you to deliver and that you can charge like $200 or less, so that it's something that doesn't take a lot of time for you, but you can easily and quickly get money.
A revenue generator. That's phenomenal. Do you have an example of one?
I have an evergreen mini service where I do one-off Squarespace customizations for $50. So usually one customization will take me like 10 minutes. So it's a really good time to money ratio.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, and totally approachable in terms of getting people kind of into your world and the experience of working with you. Very awesome. My next question for you is, what are some of your favorite sites for look, copy, and experience? I'd love to kind of send our peeps to some really great examples of sites you feel are really well done in terms of strategy and kind of execution.
One site, which from Ash Amberjay, she recently redid her site. I think it's the middlefingerproject.org,
Yeah.
but it's very content heavy. So that's a good example if you do have a lot of content and a lot of products about how she lays that out and how the navigation is.
My final question for you is, what is one big piece of advice you want to offer students for creating beautiful, responsive, easy to navigate websites and customer experiences? What's one thing you really want them to know?
A mood board really matters. I tried for a while to design without creating a mood board first, and it actually makes a big difference in how the brand and the aesthetic and the copy and everything comes out. Also, I create tone words to go with the mood board, so it's not just like images, but I'll have words also, like rebellious, creative, empowering. Those are some of my tone words for my brand.
And in terms of mood boards, I mean, there are 100 different ways to do this. You know, do you recommend using Pinterest? Is there a tool you like to use for mood boards?
Yeah, I do use Pinterest. So I start with defining those words. You could think of them like brand values. Mm-hmm. I call them tone words. And then I'll like pop them into Pinterest. And I actually did a Facebook Live training video. I could give you the link if people want.
Please, yes, I will drop that link below, guys.
Yeah, so then I just search them in Pinterest and I curate some images that I feel like speak to those words.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love like overarching words. I mean, for the workshops, the aesthetic, I give all my aesthetics a title. For my website, it was Nasty Gal Goes to Brooklyn. For the workshops, it was Vaporwave Business Class. But I think having like words or just like individual phrases that can direct the whole vibe of the project, I think that's so important. And I love the word tone words. I think that's a really awesome way to approach it. But I think those are really useful in terms of just like giving you a lens, kind viewers, giving you a lens for kind of viewing yourself and your work and both the experience of the work that you do for your clients and customers. And that's another thing I know you and I have talked about, that people forget that you're not just selling a product or service, you're selling the overall experience of working with you and connecting with you. And this is Hillary Weiss, your friendly neighborhood word shop host, signing off.